Welcome to day 354. We are in Hebrews 11 and 12, wrapping up Hebrews. And I just wanted to give you a little picture. This right here is how much we have left. We are really getting close. 11 more days. So let's get at this. We start out with a whole bunch of faith verses. And I'm not going to read them all. I want to read a few of them. Let's start with a famous verse. I like to mention the famous things that are said. This might sound familiar to you. If not, it's the first time hearing it, that's okay. Faith shows the reality. This is in Hebrews 11, verse 1, the very first verse. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in the days of old earned a good reputation. So faithful people usually have pretty good reputations. Not always, but typically. All right, so, and then it just goes on and lists all the faith stuff. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain. It was by faith that Enoch was taken. It was by faith that Noah built the boat. By faith that Moses led the Egyptians out. It's by faith that Abraham and Isaac did the things they did, and so on, and Joseph. What I want to get to is verses 33 and 35, 33 through 35. And it's this chunk 32 through 38, really. The first paragraph we have here is the successes of faithful people. All those people had successes, but they also had hard lives. Think about Joseph, who was sold into slavery, and yet he saved his whole nation, including Egypt. So wonderful things came out of faithful people, but they also struggled. Think about David, who slew the giant and did all those wonderful things, and the man after God's own heart. Faith did all of that. He ran out to the giant with just 5 stones and slayed the giant, and then cut off his head and killed him. If you want to look at, I'm looking at all the examples in here. Gideon, who had just a few people in his army and defeated many people in another army. A famous battle that we read about already. These people by faith overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, Daniel in the lion's den, quenched the flames of fire, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weaknesses was turned to strength. Their weaknesses was turned to strength. When we are weak, we are our strongest. When we're weak, it bears our strengths. It shakes you down to your foundation and shows what your foundation is really like. Nobody likes to be weak. Nobody likes to be broken. But that shows our faith. That shows our true strengths when we are at our weakest. And then the next paragraph tells about people who had faith all the way through torture. But others were tortured, verse 35-ish, 36. But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Resurrection? When's that going to be? The rapture. Okay? Some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half. And others were killed with a sword. Blah, 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 blah. It keeps going. Faith leads to wonderful successes. But sometimes it's at the hand of torture and brutal things that have happened. But these all people hoped for what was after the resurrection, okay? So the resurrection is a wonderful thing. We have the rapture and the resurrection of the dead that are righteous. Then we have the resurrection of the dead at the great white throne judgment, which is not a good thing for those people, okay? So that's your faith stuff that was in chapter 11. But there's a few other things I want to talk about in chapter 11. Go back to verse 6, and this is important to see and hear. And it is impossible to please God. Think about this. It's impossible to please God. Always? No, it's impossible to please God without faith. We've been chosen, we accepted, and we are different. You know you're different. Something about you understand is different. It is your faith. On the day you chose to believe, you were given the Holy Spirit, and God had already chosen you before the world began. Your faith is what pleases God. Okay? We're going to come back to the foundation, your foundation being weak in a minute, or at the end of this. Okay, now, verses 13 and 16. All these people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. Think about all the people in the Old Testament. All the righteous people, not because they didn't sin, they were righteous because they were chosen as well. They saw the things that come. Think about Moses. Think about when they would put the blood over the doorpost and the angel came in and took the firstborn sons. And think about the faith that these people had. You had to have faith to kill a sheep and spread the blood above your doorpost. Faith that was going to save you. Think about that. They had faith of things that were going to come, but it was way past their time. Verse 16, but they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. The point is, this is not our home. If this was our home, we'd long to be here, but we long to be with God. And yes, there's parts of us that we want to stay here and see our children grow up and see our grandchildren. And the thing is, our hope truly is in a heavenly place. And we really can't wait to be there. Okay? You don't get to choose how you get there. Okay. Now, let's talk about the rapture. I read this verse and I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is a rapture verse. This is a good one. Chapter 11, verses 39 and 40, the very last two verses in the chapter. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. Okay? For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. That's a rapture verse. The rapture comes when the dead is raised. We've already read about this. The dead is raised, and we come up with them. Okay? We will not get there before the dead are raised. All right? So that's the rapture. And they will not reach perfection without us, which is an awesome thing. And we're already perfect in God's eyes at this point. We should watch for punishment. What am I mean by this? This is in chapter 12, verse 7 and 8. So let's read this. As you endure this divine discipline, it's about the Father disciplining us, God disciplining us. As you endure this divine discipline, this is not anger. This is about disciplining us when we do bad things, which makes us understand that, yes, our sins are forgiven, and yes, God knows we're still going to screw up. And we are punished for it. And we deserve to be punished for it. But that doesn't keep us from heaven. Okay? Christ doesn't need to die again and again and again. We don't need to go back over that. There is punishment for things that we do. As we endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Yeah! You don't want him treating you like you're not his children, his child. Who ever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. So we're glad we are on the side of being his children. So welcome the discipline. And what I mean by pay attention or focus on it, meaning watch for it. All of a sudden, things start to happen. Don't immediately say, oh, Satan's attacking me. Well, think first and pay attention. Are you being disciplined for something? God does not hurt us. That's evil. That's satanic. God disciplines us. There's a difference, okay? So be watchful for that and be happy if that happens. Do not be happy if you're being attacked by Satan, okay? You have come, verses, and understanding the result of your choice. Okay, let's read this and let me rephrase that. chapter 12, verse 23 and 24. You have come to the assembly of God's firstborn children, whose names are written in heaven. Okay? That's a cool thing. Names are written in heaven. Well, see in Revelation 20, chapter 20, verse 15, and anyone whose name was not found recorded in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. We have come to the assembly of God's firstborn children. Okay? We have come to God himself, who is the judge over all things. We have come to the spirits of the righteous ones in heaven, who have now been made perfect. Okay? We are also perfect in God's eyes. They did not get to perfection before we did. Okay? They did it with us. We all came to perfection at the same time. Jesus went to hell and took people, Abraham, and the people who were there, and took them to heaven. Jesus bridged the gap because there was a great chasm between people who were saved and people who are righteous and people who weren't. And those are the people from the Old Testament. And the people who weren't were very, very hot. And the guy asking Abraham to allow someone to come and dip their finger in and have a drop of water onto his tongue. And Abraham said, even if I would do that, I couldn't get across this chasm. Jesus went to hell and grabbed people. And when Jesus rose from the grave, there were other graves that were open, and people from the Old Testament walked around Jerusalem and were taken to heaven. That is in the Bible. You have come to Jesus, the one who mediates the new covenant between God and people, and to the sprinkled blood which speaks for forgiveness instead of crying out for vengeance like the blood of Abel. The point is, we have come to this place that is a wonderful, awesome place. Unlike the people in the Old Testament at Mount Sinai who it was dark and gloomy, and because of the cloud that God put over the mountain and the fire that was there and the bellowing of his voice scared them almost to death. That's not where we have come. We have come to a great assembly of God's people. All right. Mount Zion is where we are coming to. The point is, we understand the result of our choice, that it's a happy thing that we get to look forward to. And the last thing, and this is, we're leading into Revelation here. So, shaking creation and removing it. Let's read this, chapter 12, verse 26 through 29. When God spoke from Mount Sinai, his voice shook the earth, but now he makes another promise. Once again, this is a quote from God. Once again, I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens also. This means that all of creation will be shaken and removed. All of creation will be shaken and removed, so that only unshakable things will remain. Okay? Revelation 21, verse 1. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And then the holy city comes down. Okay? And a new heaven and a new earth are there. So I wanted to share that with you and read the last verse. Verse 28 and 29, the last verses. Since we are receiving a kingdom that is unshakable, let us be thankful and please God by worshiping him with holy fear and awe. For our God is a devouring fire. Everything will melt away. He will shake it. It'll be gone. The foundation is what is going to be left. We will be in our weakest form, and our foundation will be laid bare. That is a wonderful thing, because we will be on the other side with God when all of that happens. What a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's kind of hard to paint it in that way, but yet again, we have 11 more days to understand it. and some scary things in these 11 days we'll be discussing. But I also want you to understand, part of these 11 days, we get to the rapture, and then very, very frightening things happen, and we will be in heaven during that time. So that's a wonderful thing. That's your day 354. I'll see you tomorrow.